Hello everyone and welcome. I am thibbledork, aka the Seagull Man, writer and social media for the Game Haus and a bunch of other different places. I struggled to come up with a topic for today's article, so I figured I would actually go into a little video exposition of sorts and talk about players who won't be returning to their Season 3 2018 teams for the first season of 2019's Contenders. Plenty of players are being shuffled around, leaving their old teams, looking for better opportunities, and plenty of teams are on the hunt for fresh blood to kind of patch any holes that they may have found last season. Obviously, plenty of teams did not do well in playoffs or make it to playoffs or win games or maps at all if you're Skyfoxes. So many of these squads will definitely be looking for new blood to kind of make sure that doesn't ever happen again, because it was pretty terrible to watch. And if I were Skyfoxes, I would definitely want to see some changes. I've got some B-roll here going just to kind of provide some background visual while I jibber-jabber away. And I figured it would be appropriate to show some XL2 footage because they are definitely at the front of my list of players who will definitely going places despite their rather forceful exit from their original team. For some background, XL2 have decided to opt for an effort to promote and sign local New York State talent as opposed to the multi-playoff appearance roster that they've fielded throughout 2018. In an effort, they say, to develop their local tournament scene and make New York a thriving esports ecosystem within the Overwatch sphere and things of that nature. Many more cynics have called this basically a cost-cutting measure. I'm not an insider. I am not going to make any such assumptions, as easy as it might be to throw accusations around. I have no idea. There are a number of lesser-known New York local Overwatch players who could potentially step up, although they would certainly need some work to approach the levels that the team here on your screen were capable of, but, you know, they're going to figure that out. Players like Hypnot, players like Havion, I believe it's pronounced, even players like Slasher. Why not? #1 esports consultant in the world, big-time video game esports influencer, lots of knowledge on the Overwatch scene. He's been around since the days of monthly melees and beta tournaments back in early 2016. And certainly if you're going to bring in anybody to consult on your esports franchise and maybe you don't know what you're doing, talk to Slasher. Sure, he'll help you out. And he does love New York. It's always been a prominent feature in his social media presence, is that he likes being from New York and helping out with New York things. So, who knows? XL2 will certainly give us a different look for Season 1 of 2019 than they did here in their playoff loss to ATL Academy. Spoiler alert, by the way. It's interesting to see how that's going to go. That's a video for another time, frankly, how we think they'll go, and we don't know a whole lot, although I'll get into the little of what we do know here in a tick. But we can talk, what we can discuss, what we can try and analyze is maybe looking at these players and seeing where they could end up in the wider world of the Tier 2 and potentially even Tier 1 Overwatch sphere. And I think the easiest one to start with, because he's the one I'm definitely the most impressed with, the most surprised that he's gone anywhere, is Logix. He is here on your screen right now, building up a Graviton, frying people, doing his usual deal. But what he is infinitely more well known for are his efforts as a hitscan player, especially on Widowmaker, McCree, and Tracer. You've all thanked Mr. Logix before for his, multi-kills, drop-down, grappling hook, 360 no-scope ridiculousness, which is really what made things so surprising when XL2 decided to drop arguably one of the best hit scans in the West at the Tier 2 level right now. Frankly, a hit scan that doesn't belong in the Tier 2 level, obviously had experience with Florida in Season 1. He is... in my eyes, in the eyes of many others, effectively a Tier 1 DPS without question, having been dropped from the Florida Mayhem after their season went horribly thanks to management and coaching issues and lack of translators and support services and all the things that most teams just know that you need, that Florida didn't seem to in Season 1. So he's had a weird road, but nevertheless has maintained an excellent level of performance throughout all the teams he's been on. Insane consistency, very high level mechanics, very high floor, very high ceiling. It made no sense to drop him, still doesn't, but he will certainly end up somewhere. Lots of teams need hitscan DPS more than you think here in the GOATS meta, which is very quickly going to become not the GOATS meta. I think that will change very quickly, although again, that's a topic for another video. He has shown his capability to flex on a variety of heroes beyond his usual hitscan specialties. It's very common practice to see players who are good with tracking heroes like Tracer to flex onto Zarya, who's very important right now. Not to mention he's got just a good stable of heroes outside of hitscan like Brigitte, who is unfortunately necessary. Probably a very strong Ashe when he decides to pull that out. I believe he did in this series, but I don't recall entirely. And not to mention just a high level of adaptable mechanics. He could certainly take some time, learn whatever hero he needs to learn, and play it at a very high level. So Logix will end up somewhere. As for specific landing destinations, I don't think we can start this conversation without talking about the development of Toronto Academy, which not too many people will have any specifics on, myself included, but will certainly be a talking point here in Season 1 of Contenders in 2019. Their management and coaching hunt has apparently been going fairly well. I believe they finalized most of that at this time and are working on a roster. They have a few players that they really want to bring in, which I will discuss. This play, by the way, Hawk taking down Huyal in the 1v1 as a baby is something else. So their management is all set. Their players are coming online. They're getting that figured out right now. And I don't think you could sleep soundly at night without having considered Logix for a new academy team. Here's some current rumors for you. Here's some juice that I'll drop. Currently, it appears as though the organization and management behind Mirage Esports, which is a North American Open Division team, will largely be managing the personnel arm of Toronto Academy. That means Babinski, who does have a real name, although it's just very close to that, I just don't remember it. Babinski will be the general manager of the team. Coaches and players will be pulled largely from Mirage. Players like Chain at main tank, potentially Wub. He just told me to keep an eye out. I don't know where he's going, but it's got to be somewhere good. He's on this list as well. So Toronto Academy is certainly going to be an interesting team because they'll be pulling in many ways from Tier 3, but should also definitely be looking at the pool of very high level Tier 2 and frankly should be Tier 1 players here like Logix. I think seeing Logix on Toronto Academy would be certainly no stretch of the imagination. I think it would, assuming they don't completely tank the team, it would be roughly equal to his success here on XL2, and depending on how many of his fellow XL2 players transfer to Toronto Academy, we could just see XL2 2.0, XL3, XL2 squared, XL4? Numbers, man, I don't know. Whatever you want to call them. You know, whatever iteration of this roster, it could be very similar to what you're seeing here on the screen right now. Minus Huyal and Jur, obviously, who are still staying with XL2, unless they just posted a tweet that they're gone while I'm making this video. You could see Toronto Academy just say, hey, all you guys that just got kicked out of XL2, come over here. Let's talk. Let's play. And that could certainly work. I could totally see this team saying, we are consistent playoff performers. We did so together. We did so with a variety of different coaches and staff. Obviously, that staff has put us out. We will go find a new staff with Blackjack and make it happen. And just keep coming back to playoffs and trying to do better. Heck, maybe even doing better than before if we find a good coach and a good set of staff to really support us in that endeavor and so on and so forth. The idea of Toronto Academy just being XL2 but nicer is certainly a possibility to consider, and that also means that Logix would get to do his thing with his most recent squad and keep tearing it up as he was, because, man, he was tearing it up. That also implies that Mangachu, Goliath, maybe even Tizzy, although he just got released, Clone Man, if not, could also be moving on over. It is also very telling that Mangachu was ringing for Mirage's round 11 match on Thursday. Why not? If you've signed a player to your academy team, why not have him ring for your open division team before your academy team becomes official? Get to know your new squad mates here in an open division game, which was fairly low stakes, and just dip your feet. So that is probably, I will say Mangachu to Toronto Academy is almost certainly guaranteed, especially considering he's Canadian, and Toronto Academy has already shown that it would be, via tweet, has also shown that it could potentially be looking for local talent as well. They retweeted the XL2, hey, we're looking for a New York talent thing, with the caption to the effect of like, hey, that sounds like a good idea, we should do that too, which I don't necessarily agree with, but hey, they're running the team and not me. So I think Mangachu to Toronto Academy is 99% in my book. I do not have a source for that, it's just my gut. And I certainly hope that he would end up on an academy team, because Mangachu has grounded out harder than just about anybody here in the Tier 2 scene, and is one of the oldest names in the game at this point that is not in Overwatch League, though he should be. Frankly, that also opens up the possibility of mid-season signings to Toronto. I don't think they'd go for a mixed roster, but if Tizzy were to also go to Toronto Academy for whatever reason, now that he is a free agent as well, he could certainly be signed up to Toronto, to the Defiant proper, if their front line started to struggle. Although I don't think it will. It looks pretty strong. Let's skip ahead. Avast and ZP, they love talking. Love those guys. Strong work. In any case, yeah, there's a strong case that a lot of XL2 players could end up on Toronto Academy, but not necessarily all of them. Getting back to Logix for just a little bit, because I've kept going back to him for a moment, I think if any current Western Contenders player were to be signed this late in the preseason signing window, provided that window is still open at all, I would say it is Logix. A common fan suggestion from the armchair analysts on Reddit, Twitter, etc., which definitely include myself, would often say that Logix should go to the Boston Uprising. Color Hex is suspended for a couple games. Their hitscan capabilities, with or without Color Hex, have not exactly been very highly graded, and the addition of Logix to that DPS core would make them, honestly, fairly scary. Just on his own, but also combined with the efforts of players like Note and, Gamsu, and just about everybody else, Kelix, etc. The Boston on its own has a lot of great pieces. Many people just grade them very lowly because of the mismanagement allegations and discussion of behavior and team synergy and things of that nature. Mechanically, I think the team is very good, and I think if you put Logix in there, that would only improve. It's just a matter of how much of those allegations Logix believes if Boston were to approach him, and how much Boston might think that they need him. Maybe they are very confident in Color Hex's ability when he comes back. Maybe they are very confident that they won't really need that much hit scan coming into whatever the Overwatch League meta is going to develop into. I don't know about that one, but that's okay. Again, I'm not running the team. That's on them. I don't think anyone should sleep on Logix or assume they would not need a player like Logix, because he's pretty darn good. And frankly, why wouldn't you just want to keep him in your pocket? Admittedly, unless you've already got like a top tier sniper, someone like Surefour, many of the Korean hitscan players who are just so happen to be really, really good at Widowmaker, players like Pine, Libero, etc. So Logix certainly could end up going towards an Overwatch League team that needed a hitscan player, although there are not too many. If provided he does not do that, if that window is closed, or if he can't hammer out a contract with a team that he likes in time, you could certainly see him at almost any academy. Again, I will say Toronto is most likely, though never guaranteed, and that would just be real interesting. Other players that are looking for team right now include literally every player who is not on an academy team, any unsigned roster, any players from teams like First Gen, Second Wind, Sky Foxes, Phase 2, any unsigned team from any non-NA region as well. While the export rules have been sort of tightened up coming into this season, there's still room for players outside of your home region. And players from those non-home regions really, really, really want a piece of that pie. Players from teams like LFT Owl and Base Tryhards in South America, players from teams like T1W and Flag Gaming in China, Heist, Athletico, Sydney Drop Bears, and Order from Australia. All four of those have very impressive talents that could potentially be transferred to North America. Always the consideration of high-level Korean players from Korea, and even not high-level players from Korea. Frankly, they just love those guys so much. Even Overwatch League teams will sign 5th through 8th place Korean-level players before they sign Championship, North American, or European players, which is frankly weird, but, I'm not running the team. Speaking of Europe, there's tons of stacked European talent, as shown in this season. Wow, that's a bad graph. Players from Angry Titans, One Point, Giganti, Samsung Morning Stars, Windstrike, many of them all made a very convincing case for academy-level offers, and could very well end up on academy teams in their region or otherwise. I have no idea if Paris will be getting an academy team this season or next season or whenever. I think it would certainly be logical, and I think Europe desperately needs some academy attention from a team that has very strongly placed its teleology in running an EU squad. Look up the definition of teleology, by the way, and hopefully I got that right. Their guiding light, basically, in the development of Paris Eternal is that we are going to run an EU squad because the EU guys are actually pretty good. So it would make sense for them to do the same with their academy roster. I think Paris Academy, Eternal Academy, whatever, should that exist, could be a collection of insane European talent, French or otherwise. They could certainly go for a full French roster. I've theorized that in more than one tweet. But could also do a mix of French, Italian, Portuguese, Danish, Swedish, German. There's a lot. There are a lot of countries in Europe. There's some big brain analysis for you, and very many of them are putting out some amazing Overwatch players right now. So if Paris Academy were to exist, it could be pretty scary, and frankly would be well deserved for its players, because very many players in Europe have been playing for very little money for a very long time, though that can be said for many teams in almost any region. Korean players in general, turning left there into Korea, Korean players in general that could be approached for academy spots would probably include supports at this point. I think that is largely where academy teams might be looking to switch things up this upcoming season. Teams like, and I don't want to put anyone on blast here, but teams that struggled and maybe struggled a little more in the support core might look for imports to fix those gaps, and also potentially provide mid-season signing buffers to their Overwatch League teams, who as a whole often feature more Korean players than their academy teams. Teams like Mayhem Academy, whose parent organization, the Florida Mayhem, is entirely Korean, plus Tivik, could certainly add a Korean support duo from a team like Element Mystic, Runaway, GC Busan Wave, Geekstar, Stormquake. Many of those teams have excellent support lines and could very easily be bought out of their contracts over in Korea and signed to an academy team. And I'm sure they would love it, because then they would start making money. And everybody loves making money. Players like Fuse and Undyne could potentially be pretty good signings. Lee Jae-gun and Gangnam Jin, Lastro and Amy, some names potentially to look out for. I'm not going to swap to any B-roll of them just because video editing is hard, but understand that they are very, very good at what they do. Insanely good. So if an academy team decided, hey, we need supports, those are some players they could be looking out for. European potential signings include players like Dreedro, Exorath, Luddy, and Afox. Certainly players like Aang from Windstrike, the support duo potentially from One Point. Certainly the support duo from Giganti, Lilbo and Zupe. Zupe having some experience, much like Logic's actually, over with the Florida Mayhem. I think Giganti in general could be an excellent Academy signing for just about anyone. But obviously, given they're an all-EU team, it would most likely be for Paris Academy, if Paris Academy were interested in signing a full roster outright. I don't know if any of the existing Academy rosters will make too many big changes. Maybe some of the lower ones. Obviously, like I said, like Mayhem Academy and also like NRG, who had a fairly middling start and finish. I think those two would be the most likely to make some moves. I think Envy will keep their roster. I think, oddly enough, much like their parent organization, the Dallas Fuel, Envy were really starting to come into their own towards the end of that season and actually looking pretty scary, and took Fusion University to a map 5, which only ATL Academy could really claim to come anywhere close to. It was impressive. It was unexpected. It was very, very close. Literally one boop and one missed Earth Shatter decided whether or not Envy could upset Fusion University. It was on Route 66. I made a clip of it for Contenders OW. I highly suggest you check it out. It was heartbreaking, but also extremely impressive to see the level of micro play that really decides high-level games. I don't think Envy will make any changes. I think they did astoundingly well given their start to the season, which sucked a lot. I think many of their players were playing on ridiculous ping, much like Uprising Academy, who you've noticed are a team that I haven't brought up just yet. I'll get to them. And in general, I don't think it would be very smart to take the thing that you really just managed to get going and pick it apart and rebuild it. I think Envy needs to stay right where they're at, and they can very easily be higher level playoff contenders, especially with the vacuum that XL2 will definitely leave behind them. Envy will gladly fill that gap and destroy over on the NA West group, which in and of itself is an interesting discussion that we'll have later. So yeah, Envy should stay the same. Mayhem Academy should change for sure. Uprising Academy just needs to get everybody on a normal ping, and in the same country and in the same house. That's generally pretty nice. And then Fusion Uni will probably be okay. Elk will most likely do most of his scrims with Fusion proper, my prediction here, and a commonly believed, I guess, insider opinion, if you want to call it that, which I think is why they signed Karkar. I think they are definitely going to be developing him in the offseason to take over the bulk of duties for Elk, while Elk will be busy with Fusion proper, making sure that he is integrated into their schedule and comms and playstyle in the event that Neptuno, I don't know, gets tonsillitis again or something like that. Elk in general is Overwatch League ready. Like, he's been ready for a couple seasons now, he and Alarm both, so all you gotta do now is make sure his replacement can do the same. And I think Karkar is probably one of the best, top 2 or 3 Western main supports, I should say, in NA. So Fusion Uni did it right again, stole it right out from under Second Wind, which is a problem for them. Speaking of, I do think Second Wind will definitely be looking for a new main support. I think Deponzor did just fine. I'm not ragging on the guy. He's great. I watched him play well through Open Division. I watched him play when GGA existed for a couple minutes. He's not a bad support. I just think Second Wind needs something a little different. And I think the level they're approaching or trying to stick with really requires that you have supports that can go toe-to-toe with players like Elk and Alarm, who are basically just Overwatch League supports anyways. And in that vein, Deponzor is frankly just not enough quite yet. You could look at Goliath and Jur. If Jur happens to leave XL2, I don't know. There are a few main support options from a variety of regions, which we've already gone over, but I think Second Wind will definitely be in the market for support, and that's assuming half their roster doesn't get poached like most unsigned teams do. Um, if that's the case, if they start losing high-level players like Akawa or Haku or anything like that, they will just be in the market for more. Whether or not they find players of an equal level remains to be seen. But if anything, Made at least is still there. He has decided that he's going to stick with the team, that he couldn't abandon his boys, and as such, he will maintain his developmental abilities with the team and will be able to bring up the lowly dregs of tier 3 that he has pulled up before. I'd say that sounds kind of mean. They're not dregs, they're great players already, but Made really makes them shine. That, I feel, is a big strength of Second Wind's. Second Wind's true strength, I suppose you could say, is its developmental staff, and not just Made by any stretch. Flubby and, oh goodness, names are hard, Wheats, both of them have done excellent jobs as well. And in general, the team as a whole has a great internal culture and developmental capacity, and that means even if they have to go through new players time and time and time and again, they pull out okay. Next season might be an interesting, different story, but, we'll get there when we get there. I actually think that'll probably cut it for me. There's plenty to talk about. We could theorize about who's going where and who's doing what for forever, much like ZP and Avast here often have to do on technical pauses. Haha. But I don't want to make this last too long. We're already at 26 and a half minutes here. And you guys get the idea. There are players out there who desperately deserve a spot in high-level Tier 2 or even Tier 1 play, and there are teams who are looking for them and want them very, very badly, and will do what it takes to make sure they end up on their team next season. If you have any questions about this discussion or any ideas, things that I missed, details that I got wrong, inevitably there will be some. Feel free to let me know in the comments or on Twitter at thibbledork. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed. This is a bit of an experimental piece for me where I just ramble nonstop for 30 minutes or so at a time, because that's just what I do naturally. Normally you read that, but I figured I would just kind of do it freeform here. Before we get into any World of Warcraft ads, thanks very much, and I will see you guys next time.
If you liked that, hit the subscribe button for more interviews and other great sports and esports content. Make sure to also like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter to stay up to date on all the news from your favorite sports and esports players and teams. From our house to yours.